Well, hi folks, and welcome to Isle of Wight Bushcraft. Well, in this video I'll be converting a tarp to be able to use with a wood stove, so stay tuned. Isle of Wight Bushcraft. Beautiful, lovely. Now, the reason for this video, guys, is what I want to do is convert this tarp a little bit. I want to be able to use the wood stove under the tarpaulin. Now, of course, you can't just cut a hole in a tarp and poke the stove flue pipe through. It will just melt the tarp. So what I've done is just devised a pretty simple method, really. I've put in a stove jack in this 4x4 tarp so that I can put the flue through the tarp without any fear of it melting or burning the tarp, protecting it, whilst at the same time not having too much water come through if it rains. And then I can just sit in my hammock, have the stove going, and enjoy being out in the outdoors, camp out. So here we are. Here's the stove jack that I've made. Now, this is really simple to make. All you need to do, if you want to do this yourself, is just buy one of these oven-proof oven liners, and they're excellent, and they're about £3, not very expensive. And you get enough to make a few of these, but I've cut this to you know, the size that I want. Don't want it too big. And then in the centre, I've cut a hole which is the same diameter as, I'll show you, the stove flue pipe. So that'll go through there, lovely. Now, the reason I've cut it the same diameter, I've not put it at an angle, like so, although it would go at an angle, but the reason that I've put it circular and not elliptical is because the way that I'm going to configure my tarp whenever I use the wood stove under this particular tarp is I want it in a pitched tarp mode. So I have these two stanchions out to each corner, and then a higher stanchion in the middle, so that I've got a working height in the centre of my tarp. And then that's where I'm going to put the stove jack, and that way any rain falling on will actually run away from the stove jack rather than run down onto it. And the other reason I'm putting it toward the edge of the tarp as well is because there may be times where I'll want to use this tarp without the stove. And of course, if I was to put the stove jack too near the ridge or on the side elevations of this tarp, well, if it rains, it's not going to protect me. I'm going to get water running in through the middle. By putting it toward the edge, I can keep my stove in under the tarp, and the tarp is still usable for other purposes as well. So there we are. There's the stove jack, and you see there's the hole that I've cut out. All I did was mark round that and just cut it with a sharp knife. It's not difficult to cut, and as you can see, the stovepipe fits through there perfectly. There we are. So there we are. That's the stove jack that I'm going to cut in. So I'll show you what you need now, and how to cut and sew it in. Okay, these are things you're going to need. You need a permanent marker. I'm using a green one there so that it blends in with the tarp. I've also got some premium quality linen thread here, so that's water resistant, so it's not going to rot out. Quite thick, but you're going to need it, and a thimble and a good sized needle and some pins so that I can pin the stove jack
in place. The reason for the marker is just to mark around this stove jack on the tarp, you know, the position I want it to go. And then what I'll do is I'll just measure an inch inside of that, and that's where I'll stitch it as well. There we are. So that's all we need. Stove jack, which we've cut out of an oven liner, some linen waterproof thread or equivalent, thimble, permanent marker, and a good sized needle and 4 pins. That's all you need. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll mark out this stove jack onto the tarp.
And you'll also need an old blade as well. I've got an old knife, blunt as anything. It's not used for anything, and I can heat that up then. And that's the reason for this. Heat that up and then cut out the portion of the tarp I want to remove. The reason I use a heated blade is because it will just melt through as I cut, and it will seal the edge of the tarp so that it doesn't fray in the future. So that's another piece of equipment to me, just an old blade, any old blade will do. So what I'm going to do now is just remove this section of the tarp to allow for the stove jack using this old blade. Now you can heat your blade up in a fire, or if you're at, where I am in Isle of Wight Bushcraft base camp, I've got a few mod cons, one of which is this blowtorch. So I'm going to heat it up using this, but yeah, just stand it in a fire for 5 minutes, be perfectly good. So let's heat this knife up, this blade. Okay, that's nice and hot. Let's put it on that wood there out of harm's way, and we'll make this cut now. Can I get myself positioned nicely? There we go. That's one side done now, and it just see, that's lovely. It just melts through that a treat. There we go. Now we'll do the other side, and you might find that you need to just reheat this a few times. Probably best just do round the corners as well. Yeah, less liable to tear, but like I say, melting it in this fashion, it's going to be fine. There we are. So we've removed that section. Now you'll note when you do this, you will think, dear oh me, what have I done? It looks a bit severe. But I mean, that's pretty taut, there's no tearing. So you'll be okay. Once you've got the jack in, you'll feel a lot better about it. So there we are. What I'm going to do now is pin that in place, like so, and then get it sewn in.
So I'm just going to take my 4 pins now and pin the stove jack into place.
I'm just going to pin this into place now, making sure I get it central. There we go. Out there. It's a very noisy day today. I'm not too far from civilization here, and unfortunately everyone seems to be out today. But that's the first one. As you can see, we'll pin that one in there in the bottom now. Make sure we get it straight in the sides, and then we can sew that in. There we are, making sure that's straight. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I've got that straight. Taut, that's good. There we go. So I'm just making sure there's no wrinkles in the tarp before I sew this in. Now you'll notice that I've put it on the underside of the tarp and not on the top side. And the reason I'm sewing it in on the underside is because the flue does give off a fair bit of heat. So the fact that the stove jack's underneath will protect the tarp area near to where the stovepipe is, which does get quite hot, it'll protect that, the tarp, from that heat. That's the reason why I put it underneath. You're going to get a little bit of water dripping here, you know, whatever you do, but it doesn't matter because it's going to drip onto the stove and this is going to be hot, it'll just evaporate instantly. But where you don't want any water coming in is near to your hammock. So there we are. Pin the rest of this in and we'll get it stitched in. You can see the stove jack pinned in. What I can do now is I'm going to drop the tarp, or this half of the tarp, so that it's loose, and then I can then sew it in. Right, okay. There we are. Let's take that stanchion out. And there we are. So it's pinned in place, we can stitch that in now. Just threading the needle. Somebody's got a chainsaw going in the distance. There we are. Okay, we can sew it in now. So what I'm going to do is start on this corner here. I'm sewing from the outside so that I can follow this perimeter around of this cut evenly. And that's why you need the thimble. Side. Now I'm not the best sewer, but I'm hoping I can do a reasonable job of this. There we go. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing it through several stitches at a time. And there we are, it's all sewn in. You can see I've double stitched it around. I'm not the world's best neatest sewer, but it does the job. There we go. That's the stove jack sewn in. What we do now is we'll put the stove in place now and get it alight and make a coffee, I think. Okay, so we'll just put our stanchion back in place. There we are. Okay, so you can see that I've got this part of the tarp horizontal, virtually. Running slightly back, so slightly pitched porch mode. And these sides of the tarp are running at a pitch as well. So you might get a little bit of water run through if it rains, but not too much. And like I say, if it does come through, it'll run down the flue or onto the stove and just evaporate. It's certainly not going to get me wet when I'm sleeping in my hammock. So I'll bring you in a little bit closer and you can see how we put the stove up through the tarp now. So there we are, I can just take my flue sections, put it up through the stovepipe. Just bring that a little bit forward. There we are, look at that, perfect. And I'll just put my final section, actually I'll put the whole lot on I think. Final two sections of flue. And then the spark arrestor as well. There we go. Right, just put these up. There we are. And there is our stove in place. Excellent. Well, there we are, there's the stove in place. And what it means now is I've got this 4x4 tarp. So it means I can light the stove and enjoy some stove cooking and brews right underneath my tarp. Which is it's another option to have. I'm all for having options. I wouldn't like to keep doing the same thing over and over again. I do like to mix it up a little bit. Okay, well, it wouldn't be right to have this stove in place and have this new stove jack in place without a trial run. So we'll get it fired up and make a brew, I think. Okay, some wood in there. There we go. Okay, so I've got a nest of some dry grass here, and I'm going to use my fire still and charcloth and flint to light this. So I like using a nest to light the stove because it gives a good rush of flame in through and lights that kindling inside pretty rapidly. Also going to use a little bit of cramp ball in with my nest as an ember extender. And I'm going to cut a nice bit of cramp ball there. There we are, and that'll act as an extender in the nest. Okay, put that cramp ball back in my fire pouch. Take our steel and charcloth, then we'll get a spark and put it in to our nest. There's quite a lot of charcloth there actually. That should do it. There we go. If you can see that. I'll bring it closer in so you can see. That's burning lovely. Okay, we'll put that char in our nest. Put that in there, close it up, and we'll give it a blow and blow it to flame. Nearly there. There we go, that's nearly there. I think I'll put that in the stove and then finish blowing it to flame inside, because that's suddenly going to go. That's right on the cusp of it now. That's right on the cusp of igniting, so I'm going to put it in the stove and then finish it off there. So there we are, we'll give that a few minutes and then we'll put the coffee pot on. Now the stove's been going for about 20 minutes now. The stove jack's a little bit warm, but the surrounding tarp there's no heat at all. So that's working an absolute treat. Yeah, very pleased with that. It's a good little conversion, that good little mod. Well, coffee's ready. Put the oh, that's not too bad. Just kept it on there to keep it. Kept it on the stove to keep it warm. And we'll push the plunger down. And there we go. Ready to pour. Well, there we are, guys. Now, if you've not done hammock camping before and it's something that's new to you, then I'll put a card up above, and you'll see that flash up above. Now, if you click on that card as it appears, it will line up the video for you next, and then automatically play it for you. And that's a video, a tutorial on how to set up your hammock and your tarp so that you too can hammock camp like this. It will help you a lot. Also, if you'd like to learn how to rig a tarp for a quick, speedy deployment, particularly in inclement weather, then again, I put a card up above there, and if you click on that card, it will line that video up as well, which will explain how to do that. And if you're not sure how to rig your hammock, I use the DD hammocks. If you're not sure how to rig your hammock up, so that you don't get water come down and track into your hammock. You don't want that happening. You want to do it properly. Well, I put a card up for that as well, and that would explain to you how to rig your hammock. Just click on that card as it appears and it will line that video up for you next. Well, that's all from me, guys, for the moment. Thanks for joining me. More videos coming up. Plenty of projects here at Bushcraft Base Camp. But for the moment, I'll say take care out there or in there, and we'll see what happens Sunday, eh? And but for the moment, it's bye for now, and see you next time, guys. Take care. Oh, that's lovely. Oh yeah. Ah, this is hammock camping.